Just look at what Republicans have been quietly doing in Congress, voting to advance cuts on hundreds of billions of dollars from Medicaid and veterans benefits, so they can take that money and give it to billionaires in the form of tax cuts and sweetheart government contracts to their own companies like SpaceX.
Alexandria Ocasio Cortez is still on her Fight the Oligarchy tour with Bernie Sanders, drawing in record crowds even in red districts and red states. The tour is so big by now that even Republicans can't ignore it, Republicans like Meghan McCain. McCain responded to a video clip where AOC assured a crowd on the tour that regardless of the right and the media and the way that they try to divide us, we are all people with goals that are more similar than they are different. McCain said this on X: she's going to run, and her message of economic populism is more powerful than people are giving her credit for. I think plenty of people are giving her and the quote-unquote radical left credit where it's due for the messaging there, but perhaps not the people in McCain's circles. And those are the people the left needs to win over if they want to win elections. And what's interesting to see is that that actually seems to be what's happening.
On the way here, we got a very interesting piece of news, which is that some of those Republican House members that we had visited, they just led a letter warning the Republican leadership, saying, we don't know if we can vote for Medicaid cuts now. That's you, Missoula. That's you, Montana. That's you, Colorado. That's you, Arizona. That's you, California. That's you, the people.
Whenever the Democrats speak of winning over voters from the Republicans, it's usually followed by a weakening of the party platform and message, a softening on anti-Republican and anti-Trump rhetoric, etc. In other words, they tend to just pander to the people they're trying to win over while alienating and frustrating their existing base. And that strategy just leaves everyone with a party that doesn't even know what it stands for anymore and a voting base that is less than inspired or optimistic. But Bernie Sanders and AOC, they aren't doing that. Bernie has been screaming the same message for decades, and it's been popular with people once they actually listen to him. That is, like, once they get past all of Bernie's bad PR, claims that he is some radical socialist, basically a communist, much of which doesn't even come from the right. Other Democrats have been demonizing Bernie Sanders for as long as he has been around. Now there's talk of AOC running for Chuck Schumer's Senate seat, and who knows, stranger things have happened. If she's considering running, it will be a question of whether or not her progressive message can and will win a statewide election compared to a smaller election in her small district. Whenever the voting bloc becomes more broad, the general thinking is that the message also needs to become more broad and more inclusive, more all-encompassing. But as I mentioned, she and Bernie haven't been doing that so far on their tour, and they're already attracting plenty of attention from people on both sides of the aisle. Conversely, Chuck Schumer has drawn the ire of many Democratic voters for his perceived weakness and his apparent unwillingness to do enough or anything to stand up to the Trump administration in any kind of meaningful way. For instance, he recently sent Trump a very strongly worded letter about Trump's attempts to interfere with Harvard. Groundbreaking. Thank you for your service, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
We will win. We will win! We will win!
But he really made headlines, very angry headlines, when he voted with Republicans to pass a controversial spending bill in an effort to avert a government shutdown. And arguably, the worst part, at least for the sake of this conversation, isn't just that he voted that way, in a way that upset most Democratic voters across this country. It's that he is defending his vote and has been doing so ever since. Here's a headline from the Washington Post from just this week. Chuck Schumer is listening, but he's still sure he was right. What good does listening do us if he is still stubbornly defying the stated will of the people? It's not just stubbornness, it's arrogance. And that arrogance is born from being in a position for too long with little to no recourse for bad or even mediocre behavior. But back to Meghan McCain. She said in that quote from earlier, she's going to run, presumably referring to AOC's potential Senate run. And she isn't the only Republican who can no longer deny that the progressive message is attractive and popular to a lot of Americans. Former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said that he believes AOC could become the Democrats' next party leader within just a few years, saying AOC and progressives like her will raise more money running against Democrats than they will running against Republicans, and whoever comes out of that will become the leader of the Democratic Party. And AOC is raising that money. She brought in nearly $9.6 million in the first quarter of 2025, which is more than she's ever raised in that same amount of time. And she entered the second quarter with $8.2 million cash on hand. In a recent post on his Substack, pollster Nate Silver and his guest Galen Druk said that while it's really too early to be making these types of predictions, they believe that AOC is on track to be at the very top of the Democratic ticket in 2028. So AOC is currently 35 years old. She'll be 36 in October. In the event that she is at the top of the Dem ticket in 2028, in the event that she actually becomes the president in that election, she will be the youngest to have ever done so, not to mention the first woman and the first Latina. AOC, for her part, hasn't said whether or not she's even interested in mounting a primary challenge against Chuck Schumer for his Senate seat, but she has been making moves that suggest that she is considering something bigger for herself and her political career. This tour that she's on right now isn't a tour where she's actively pursuing anything. She's not currently running for anything or garnering votes, but she is pulling in a ton of fundraising dollars, and she is maintaining and elevating her public/political profile. She has a fairly comfortable, safe seat in the House right now, which is something that's very hard to give up when you're a congressperson these days. But she can't stay in the House forever. Her recent bid for the top job on the House Oversight Committee shows that she is interested in pursuing these higher positions with more visibility and more leadership. Speaking of which, it's fairly well established. I don't think it's conspiratorial to say that AOC didn't win that race against Jerry Connolly because Nancy Pelosi intervened and interfered, essentially placing Connolly in the role because he was an old school Democrat just like Nancy Pelosi. Connolly, just for comparison, is 40 years older than AOC. He is 75 compared to her 35. And at the time when he was running the race for the House Oversight Committee, he had throat cancer. Now, as of Monday, he has announced that he is stepping down soon, whatever that means, from the position because of his poor health. So now the House and the country are waiting to see if AOC will try for the role again, even though Connolly technically hasn't vacated the seat yet, and even though to do so, due to the fallout from her last bid, AOC would have more procedural hurdles to overcome than other prospective candidates would. Ultimately, the Democrats in power are aging out quickly, and they have done very little to build up a bench. If anything, the bench that they have built is simply too reflective of the old guard. They're trying to preach a populist message while pandering to billionaires and corporate interests. Meanwhile, millennials in and out of Congress are fighting just to get a word in and just to be taken seriously, just to get a seat at the table and play the game, but they have been getting blocked continually. And now Gen Z is ready to get in the game, and they're facing even more opposition. Let me just say, this country wants millennials in charge. I can't speak for Gen Z, but I imagine that they're in the same boat, or if they're not yet, they probably will be soon. But millennials have been through it in this country. We grew up in a time where things were as good as they were going to be for the youth. It was a generally optimistic time. Media was good. Culture was good. Fashion was weird, but good. It was all so good that everything we have now is a derivative, worse version of what we had back then. But once all of these 90s kids got out into the world, we found ourselves fighting so many, not all, but many of the same elders who once told us that this world was our domain to protect and grow. But here we are in 2025. We are tired of fighting fights that we shouldn't even have to be fighting against people that we would rather have as allies than opponents. We're tired of constantly pivoting our careers just to have a backup plan for when we suddenly get laid off from the jobs that we studied and practiced for years to have. We are tired of renting and not buying, and we're tired of being told to accept less for ourselves and for our families and for society because the days that we long for are simply not coming back. Millennials, generally speaking, as a cohort, are highly educated, overworked and underpaid, and we're all somehow just walking around with imposter syndrome, believing that we don't deserve the higher positions or the bigger salaries because we still have not done enough to earn the things that we were promised in exchange for so much less from us. No one will work harder than a millennial because it's the only way that we know how to be, and no one understands the plight of the populace better than a millennial because we have lived multitudes of lives. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.